China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, has called on his Japanese and South Korean counterparts to unite and revitalise the Asian continent and move away from their Western allies. Wang told his guests attending a forum that many in the West can't distinguish between Asian nationalities.
Americans take all visitors from China, South Korea, and Japan as Asians. They cannot tell the difference between Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans, and it is the same in Europe. No matter how blonde you dye your hair or lift your nose tip, you cannot become a Westerner. We need to remember where we come from.
Wang Yi also urged Asian people to resist the resurgence of a Cold War mentality and reject the coercion of hegemony, instead promoting open regionalism and inclusive Asian values. Wang also accused, quote, certain major powers outside the region of exaggerating ideological differences to sow confrontation. Earlier, my colleague Fiorella Isabel discussed US interests in Japan and South Korea with a panel of guests.
In answer to Ross's, things that, I don't understand why, race has anything to do with foreign policy, obviously forgets that Japan was forced into the Plaza Accords in 1986. And in fact, their economy today is worth less than it was in real dollar terms at the time they signed that. The U.S. was not interested in having a competitor and therefore beat Japan down. And I don't think that the Japanese have forgotten that. They may need the U.S. for their perceived interest in terms of protecting their country, but they know full well it was the U.S. who initially forced the Meiji Restoration by forcibly entering and taking over ports, forcing Japan to open up. And then it was later the U.S. has basically occupied Japan since 1945. So, this idea that the Japan love and are interested in the U.S., I think you have to look very carefully at the historical roots before you start saying that that's not important or that race doesn't play an issue. The fact is, you hear it all the time in the U.S., Asians, they're good at math, but they're not very creative. Now that myth has been busted by the fact that China and other Asian nations are plowing ahead in terms of technological innovation, you still have the remnants of that somehow big white brothers should be taking care or keeping the brown brothers in control.
Well, whether or not NATO opens office in Tokyo, that's first and foremost a decision for the NATO member countries, and Japan appears to be a willing partner for that. But to go back to what Wang Yi said, I'm not exactly sure the point he was trying to make. I'm not sure how many people in China could tell Americans apart from Canadians, or French from Belgians or Dutch or Germans or Swiss or Italians. So if we want to have a discussion about is South Korea or Japan's foreign policy sufficiently independent from United States decision-making, or does ASEAN maintain its own foreign policy? Does India maintain its own foreign policy? Then we could have that discussion. I'm not really sure about the introducing the ethnic angle into it. I personally don't find that very productive. But NATO ultimately is still going to remain North Atlantic focused, even if it does open an office in Tokyo.
Right now, we're at a very important juncture when the United States is trying to provoke a war with China in East Asia. And the United States cannot do it alone because it suffers what's called the tyranny of distances. It has to cross the entire Pacific Ocean to fight China. So this is why the United States right now is trying to loop in its vassal states, which is South Korea and Japan, on its anti-China crusade bandwagon. Now, Wang Yi is saying, look, why you don't have to be the vassal states. You don't have to be the client states of the United States who are just using you as a proxy.